Alrighty, folks, this week our topic is crime scene processing. Processing is broken into three parts: photography, sketching, and searching of the crime scene. And so this will be a three-part video series. Today we're talking mostly about the photography aspect, or this video. And remember, every crime scene is unique, and so there needs to be a basic process to your processing, which, notice this is not bullet pointed, or this is not numerical order, this is bullet pointed. You have to recognize you have evidence, you have to document it in some way, shape, or form, you have to collect it, package it after the collection, preserve it long term, and then reconstruct the crime scene. And obviously, stuff like reconstructing the crime scene has to come after collection, and packaging is going to come after collection. Long-term preservation is something that does happen even before you collect the evidence. Some of our first responder duties sets the stage for presentation. Documentation is happening as we're collecting, as we're packaging, as we're preserving. So there is a little bit of a back and forth through these things. That's why it's not step 1, 2, 3, 4. There is some cyclical aspects to it. All right, so basically remember this as it relates to videotaping your crime scenes, photographing them, sketching them. They all have their positives and negatives. We're really not going to get into videotaping in a lecture situation. There's some talk about it in your book. But remember this as it relates to sketches and photos. We need both to give that good story to the jury. Also, we need a good written report. We're not talking about written reports in this class. All right, so photography. Our big thing is creating fair and accurate representations of the crime scene. We're trying to create a situation where somebody can look at our photos and they can see the crime scene as we saw it. It is not us interpreting the crime scene. It is not us altering the crime scene. It is not us using trick photography to make things look bigger or smaller. It's about us taking good photos that make everybody else who looks at these images see what the crime scene really is. So a couple little guidelines here. We got to show every photo, or every piece of evidence at the crime scene in a photo, if not multiple photos. If we find more evidence later on during our investigation, we need to photograph those. So again, it's not a first, second, third. Once you're done with photography, you are not done with photography. Once you move on in your crime scene process, you will always go back to photography when more evidence is found. We'd like you to use scales and rulers in photos. We would like to start off our photography process with a photo placard. That's going to be next. Make sure that when we start getting into some close-ups and some detail shots, we're using tripods, and basically make sure that when you're taking pictures of things, you're doing so that things are in what we call parallel to the camera. You can read this ruler. So if you were taking a photo with this ruler, you would have it like this with the camera, like my camera is pointing straight at it. Not like this. You wouldn't believe how many crime scene photos I see where the ruler is like this, where you're trying to get, say, a measure of my cell phone, and the ruler is like this. This is proper. Taking a photo across the thing, imagine my cell phone sitting on a table and you shoot across it and you have the ruler like this, don't work. We can't read the ruler. So we'll come back to that. You'll probably hear me talk about that again. When in doubt, take a picture of it. I'd rather you take too many pictures than not have enough at your crime scenes. All right, so photo placards, what we're doing is just taking a sheet of paper from your notebook. Your department, when you get a job, might have an official placard. Either is good. I don't care what you use. But we want to record some basic information: our name, our date, our location, the case number, the particulars of the case. So this way, when we download the camera, we know that these photos belong to this case. All right, so the shots that we need to get, not depicted on this slide, but we need to establish our location first. Then, as it relates to the evidence, what we need to do is take overall, mid-range, and close-up shots. Now, there's a couple different textbook authors who use different terms. There's a couple of different folks who like to use different terms. So you may have heard other names like long range, establishing range, comparison photos. I like long or overall, mid-range, close-up. Use whatever terms you like. So the first thing we do is establish our location, take a picture of the outside of the crime scene, show the house, show the street sign. If you're out at a rural community, you would have these what are called fire number signs at the end of the driveway that include sometimes the township and the road name. Sometimes it doesn't include both. You just kind of got lucky in this one that it's got the township and the road name. But We want to show the street signs. We want to show the actual address, the location we're at. Then we get into the crime scene. Now, this is the overall crime scene from a fire I investigated. Now, do note there is some irrelevant stuff in this photo. That's okay. Our goal, though, is to show the overall scene. So here we have a big old pole barn. Many of you have probably seen big old pole barns, and I'm standing at the one end of the pole barn looking across it. This is an overall shot. In a perfect world, we want overall shots from the doorway into the crime scene and then each of the four corners of every room looking around the room to show you the whole room. So I can guarantee you there's an additional photo from over here in the corner of the barn. There's a photo from over here in the corner of the barn, over here in the corner, over here in the corner, and I'm in the barn door taking this photo. I'm not going to show you all those photos for the sake of time, but just do be aware that there are multiple photos of this. Now, then we get into the mid-range. So here's our mid-range picture. Notice there's two mid-range pictures. There's an item of evidence right here. Our idea here is not really to show the evidence per se, but to put the evidence into context. You can see the item of evidence right here too. You might not be able to see it too well in the video. That's the point of the close-up. What's important here is to put this into context. If we go back a photo, there's that pile of silage. You can see the smoke here, so we can see there's an item of evidence here, but we don't care about it in the overall. What we care about is the whole room. Now we're coming forward. I'm starting to care about this pile of silage because this has got a piece of evidence I identified and I'm interested in. And so we can see some smoke coming out of here. We can see there's something here. Took it from another angle. You can see that this pile of silage is piled up against the vertical uprights which hold up the roof. Notice the other side of the barn has collapsed. And so when we get into the close-up photo, well, what do we have here? Where that smoke is coming from, we actually have a stick of wood that's stuck out. And there's some additional photos down here on the side where you can see there's quite a bit of burning and quite a bit of burning here. There's actually like some pieces of fabric where somebody had taken and wrapped this piece of board in fabric, put in gasoline on it, lit it on fire, and stuck it into this pile of hay, hoping to get the pile of hay on fire. They did this on two different sides of the barn. The idea was that if two different sides of the barn, the roof collapses, the whole barn's going to collapse. Unfortunately, one side didn't collapse, the other side did. So you see the fire scene that we have now. Overall, mid-range close-up. We call this visual storytelling because as I'm walking through these scenes, you can see we've got one end of the barn collapsed, the other end not collapsed. No burning up here. You have this thing here, which in this photo you can see, but you don't know what the relevance of it is. Now we can show you in multiple angles what the relevance of this is, that you can see a little closer. There's some smoke here, there's some damage down here. We can see these verticals, that it's actually piled right up against these verticals. And then we get into, here is our real piece of evidence, this wick, this torch, this whatever you want to say that was used to start this fire. But unfortunately, for our arsonist, it did not actually work. Fortunately for me as the investigator, it didn't work. So I got this beautiful piece of evidence. All right, then we want to get in and do some detailed shots. So just kind of a little example here. We've got like the head of a screw. So this was somehow used as a weapon. I don't care. This is just kind of a classroom example. And then what we want to do is add in that scale so we can show the close-up with scale. So how big is the head of the screw? The reason I kind of use this is, you know, everybody always says, well, wait a second, Lefebvre, that's on notebook paper. So you can tell how big that screw is because we know how far apart the lines on a notebook paper is. Do we? There's wide rule notebooks, there's college rule notebooks, there's artistic rule, there's like 20 different lengths of rules on notebook paper. And so in this image, you can't tell. But in this picture now, we can see, well, this thing is just a little over a millimeter in length and, you know, just a little bit shy than half a millimeter in width. Again, going back to my example before, notice how we're looking at the ruler, we can read it. It's not looking across the ruler. And you wouldn't believe how many crime scene photos I see where the people are taking a photo looking across the ruler. We can't read this. A year from now, when somebody asks, how big was that knife? How big was that gun? How big is that USB thumb drive? Well, now we can read it versus now you can't. Read it, can't. Read it, can't. I'm repeating myself. There might be a reason why, because when I have the photography class next semester, when I have most of you, I want to make sure that I'm reading your rulers and scales, and I do see it quite regularly where folks aren't. All right, so wrapping up. As we're taking all these photos, we need to be taking a photo log, and a photo log is, again, an official form. It's just a page in your notebook. I don't care how you do it. What you're doing is you're writing down all the photos you took, and it's very important to do this because I see a lot of folks who don't do this, and they say, well, what's the big deal? I can look at my photos. I was at the crime scene. I remember what the photos are. Will you really remember when this goes to court a year from now, 2 years from now? Will you remember all the details? It's very easy to get confused, so you need to write down all the information about what this photo was so that we understand why it's relevant. Especially when we start talking about fingerprints. Are we talking about a close-up of a fingerprint on the doorknob? Are we talking about the close-up of the fingerprint on the kitchen handle, which are both silver backgrounds? And which fingerprint is which? When you got to start flipping through your photos and get a blow-up of the fingerprint from the doorknob for court, you're going to have a 50-50 guess. Is this the doorknob or is this the kitchen handle photo? Because they're both on these gray backgrounds. I don't know. 50-50 guess. I'll blow this one up. Well, now we're going to be in court showing the wrong photo to the jury. How's that going to look? Somebody's going to figure that one out. So simple photo log that we typically see, where we're looking at our case number, our date, who the photographer is, which camera you're using, which memory card you're using, and then your description of the photo. Overall photo of crime scene, overall photo of crime scene from north side of the wall, from south side of the wall, etc., etc., etc. This gives us all of our details, so there's no questions later on. These are also the building blocks of our report. Again, we're not going to cover report writing in this class at all. Don't worry, no report writing this class. But these are the building blocks so that when you do have to write a police report, you know what you are saying. All right, so that is the photographic process. Next video, we're going to be talking about the sketching and diagramming process. If you have any questions, let me know.